The Nephilim were real, and the Bible tried to warn us. In the early chapters of Genesis, right before a great flood washes the world clean, we find a cryptic and unsettling passage. The 6th chapter speaks of a time when divine beings looked down on humanity, and what they saw led to a forbidden union. This union, according to the text, gave birth to a mysterious group known as the Nephilim. Their presence on earth is presented in the context of a world spiraling into wickedness, a wickedness so great that God would choose to start over. For centuries, this brief mention of a strange people has sparked intense debate and speculation. Who were the Nephilim? Were they just powerful human kings from a forgotten age? Or were they something else entirely? Something not of this world? Today, we're looking into one of the Bible's most enduring mysteries. We'll explore the ancient texts that describe these so-called fallen ones and investigate the story of how their legacy became intertwined with the near destruction of the world. Section 1. The Forbidden Union. To understand the puzzle of the Nephilim, you have to start at the source, Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. It says, "When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose." The language might seem simple, but these phrases carry a lot of theological weight. Daughters of men is pretty clear. It refers to human women, but the identity of the sons of God is the question that unlocks this whole mystery. Historically, a few main interpretations have taken root. One of the oldest is sometimes called the Sethite view. This theory suggests the sons of God were the male descendants of Adam's righteous son, Seth. Following this logic, the daughters of men would be the female descendants of Cain's lineage, which is portrayed as corrupt. In this version of the story, the sin isn't supernatural, it's spiritual. The godly line of Seth began intermarrying with the worldly line of Cain, which diluted their faith and corrupted humanity from within. It's a story about spiritual compromise, not a cosmic horror story. This view keeps the conflict on a human level, explaining the world's corruption as a result of broken covenants. But there's another, far more startling interpretation, the one that has captivated readers for millennia, the angelic view. This interpretation suggests that the sons of God were not men at all, but divine beings, angels who left their place in heaven. There's a strong scriptural basis for this idea. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew phrase, Bnei Ha-Elohim, sons of God, is used in other places to specifically mean angelic beings. For example, in the book of Job, the sons of God come to present themselves before the Lord in his heavenly court. According to this view, these angels committed a profound act of rebellion. The New Testament book of Jude seems to reference a similar event, speaking of angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper dwelling. What was their sin? Genesis says they saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and took them. Many believe this describes an act of lust, a transgression against the created order. Under this interpretation, divine spirits were procreating with mortal women, mixing two separate realities that were meant to be kept apart. It was this act, this violation of divine boundaries, that would set the stage for catastrophe. The consequences wouldn't be just spiritual, they would be physical, monstrous, and earth-shattering. Section 2. The offspring of angels. The result of this union is described in Genesis 6, verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Here we meet the offspring, the Nephilim. The name itself is a bit of a mystery. The Hebrew root word is naphal, meaning to fall. This has led many to translate Nephilim as the fallen ones. This could point to their parents, the offspring of fallen angels, or it could describe their violent nature, as those who fall upon others. The Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, took a different path, translating Nephilim as gigantes, the Greek word for giants. That single translation decision has powerfully shaped our popular image of the Nephilim as towering figures. So were they fallen demigods or literal giants? The text is ambiguous, but it does describe them as mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Hebrew word for mighty men is gibborim, often used for powerful, fearsome warriors. This implies they had a legendary, almost infamous status in the ancient world. While Genesis is brief, other ancient texts written around that time paint a more detailed picture. The most famous is the Book of Enoch. While it isn't part of the official Bible for most Christian and Jewish traditions, it was very influential in ancient Judaism and is even alluded to in the New Testament book of Jude. The Book of Enoch gives a terrifying account. It says the Nephilim were a race of voracious giants who consumed everything humanity produced. When people could no longer feed them, the giants turned on humanity itself, killing and eating people and even drinking blood. This image of violent, world-destroying giants aligns with what Genesis says next about the state of the world. Their birth wasn't just a strange event, it was a symptom of a world spiraling into chaos. Section 3. The corruption and the warning. The birth of the Nephilim is presented as part of the context for the widespread corruption that plagued the ancient world. Immediately after their mention, Genesis 6:5 gives a grim diagnosis. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. The language here is absolute. Every thought, every intention was only evil all the time. This extreme depravity is given as the reason for the flood. For those who hold the angelic view, the reason for this sudden moral collapse is tied to the fallen angels. The Book of Enoch, once again, offers details where the Bible is silent. According to 1 Enoch, the angels who descended were called the Watchers. They didn't just sin by taking human wives, they began to teach humanity forbidden secrets. One angel, Azazel, reportedly taught men how to make swords and shields, the arts of war. He also taught them about cosmetics and ornaments, framed as tools for vanity and seduction. Other angels taught sorcery, astrology, and other magical arts. This wasn't enlightenment. It was a contamination of forbidden knowledge. This narrative from Enoch offers a potential explanation for the explosion of wickedness in Genesis. The corruption wasn't just a human failing, it was supernaturally fueled. The Nephilim, with their violent nature, could be seen as the physical embodiment of this corruption. This is the ultimate warning of the story. It's a cautionary tale about crossing divine boundaries and the consequences of forbidden knowledge. God's response was as extreme as the corruption itself, the Great Flood. Genesis 6:7 records God's decision. I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, for I am sorry that I have made them. The flood was a cosmic cleansing, a divine reset to wash away the wickedness that had consumed the world. Noah was saved, the text says, because he was blameless in his generations. While this is usually interpreted as referring to his moral character, some have speculated it could also imply a pure human lineage, untainted by the otherworldly unions. However, this is a speculative interpretation, not explicitly stated in the text. Section 4. Echoes through time. If the flood was meant to be a total reset, a perplexing question comes from Genesis 6:4 itself, which says, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward." This little phrase has sparked endless debate. Did some survive? Or did a similar event happen again? The most direct post-flood reference is in the book of Numbers. When Moses sends 12 spies into Canaan, they return with a terrifying report. 10 of them say, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." Here, centuries after the flood, the word Nephilim is used again. The spies link a group of giants called the Anakim to the legendary pre-flood Nephilim. It's a matter of interpretation whether this was a literal lineage or if the terrified spies were using the most fearsome term they knew to describe the intimidating people they saw. Many scholars suggest the spies were exaggerating out of fear, but the Old Testament does speak of several giant clans in and around Canaan. Besides the Anakim, there were the Rephaim, Amim, And Zuzim, King Og of Bashan, an enemy of the Israelites, is described as the last of the Rephaim, with an iron bed over 13 feet long. These accounts suggest that a lineage of giants, whatever their origin, was a real threat to the Israelites. This brings us to the most famous giant of all, Goliath. The Philistine champion may have been a remnant of this ancient terror. Some scholars connect Goliath to this lineage, noting that he is described as a Gibbor, or mighty man, which echoes the language used for the original Nephilim. The battle between David and Goliath, then, can be seen as more than just a story of a boy's faith. It's a symbolic climax to a conflict that began before the flood, a representative of God's chosen people standing against an echo of the ancient rebellion that once threatened the world. The story of the Nephilim reminds us that the biblical narrative is filled with mysteries that challenge our modern worldview. It forces us to ask tough questions about good and evil and the boundaries between the spiritual and physical worlds. What we've discussed today is just scratching the surface. The lore around the Watchers, the Nephilim, and the pre-flood world is incredibly deep. If this journey into a forgotten corner of biblical history has sparked your curiosity, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. We love exploring these kinds of profound and often overlooked topics, and we want to hear from you. What are your theories about the Nephilim? Do you think it's a story of rebellious angels or a cautionary tale about human weakness? Let us know in the comments below. Your questions and insights help us all dig deeper. Conclusion. So, what are we supposed to make of this story? From a few cryptic verses in Genesis, a fascinating narrative unfolds. A tale of celestial rebellion, a forbidden union, and the birth of a mighty and mysterious people called the Nephilim. We've seen how different interpretations try to explain who they were and how their presence is tied to the story of a world grown so corrupt it required a divine reset. We then saw how echoes of these giants, or at least the fear of them, persisted long after the flood, confronting the Israelites in Canaan and on the battlefield with Goliath. Whether you see the sons of God as fallen angels or men from a godly lineage, the core message remains a powerful warning about pride, lust, and the arrogant pursuit of forbidden power. It's a story about how quickly things can fall apart when sacred boundaries are blurred. For the ancient writers, this account was more than just a myth. It was part of their history, a dark chapter that explained why the world had to be washed clean. The Nephilim serve as a testament to a time when, as the story goes, giants walked the earth, and heaven and earth collided with disastrous consequences. The warning is clear. Some lines aren't meant to be crossed. This brings to mind a question posed by Jesus in the New Testament when he prophesied about the end times. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. That passage forces us to wonder, if the Nephilim were a key feature of Noah's day, what does that imply for the future? The Bible has told its story. The question is, are we listening?